So I'm going to be organizing a little meeting about how to, make a textbook more accessible to students or more relevant, more interesting, more engaging, and so on. And then I started thinking, well, what is an example that I can use for that? So I decided to show something that I'll probably be doing next week, which is a unit on, whoa, which is a unit on finances. So let me actually go back here. Personal finance. Yeah, so we're going to be going back. We were staying away from the textbook in my class, one of my classes, for a few weeks because we had to work on some other things. So we're going to be going back to the textbook, I guess our required textbook, and we'll be talking about personal finance. So I thought maybe I can use that as an example. And this is something, I won't do this exactly in the class, but just kind of to give an idea of the way that I approach using textbooks. Well, I mean, just teaching in general, but the way I approach using textbooks, especially if they're required. This is the textbook we're using, and so here's the first page of the first lesson. And as you can see, I can zoom in a little bit. It's not that great. Okay, it's a lot of empty space, not a lot of support. So, for example, let's look at B. Think about how you spend your money. Answer the questions on a separate piece of paper. And then you've got the four questions. Did you go on vacation last year? How much did it cost? How much do you spend during the holidays or on family birthdays every year? How often do you get your hair cut? How much does it cost? And what do you spend on transportation each month? Do you have a bus pass, ride a bike, or drive a car? Now, there's really no vocabulary support here, language support, grammar support, whatever. If we go to the so-called teachers support, teachers edition or lesson planner, whatever you want to call it, um, there's really not a lot there as well. So this is basically this is all it says in the teacher's lesson planner, the teacher's book. Go over this exercise with students and have them write their answers. When they finish, ask them for ideas on how they would organize the money they spend. Okay, well, that's not very helpful. So not very engaging, right? So here's what I was thinking. Let's expand this. Let's give the students a lot of time to work on this, and let's make it a little bit more meaningful than just writing down their answers. So I spent about, I don't know, less than 10 minutes just thinking and writing in my notebook about, the things that they can do. And then I'm going to try to expand this into something, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to an hour even. Um, of course, you don't have to do all of this stuff. You can just expand it a little bit, but I thought why not go the extra mile and just show you kind of my thought process. And I think what this also does is I don't want to use the word kill time because I am putting a lot of effort into this, and the students are um, getting a lot of useful, language practice as well, and vocabulary and grammar and so on. But what I'm trying to say is, I want to stretch these exercises out, stretch these activities out, really give it time to breathe rather than just kind of rush through them and okay, just write your answers down and then we'll move on to the next activity. Um, you know, it kind of makes it easier for me too because I don't have to try to do something different every day. So, for example, this is lesson one, getting organized, organizing your finances. It gets into budgeting as well. So instead of spending one day on this, which is I think what they're suggesting in the teacher's edition, yeah, you're looking at a 1 day lesson, right? Well, why not stretch it out into 3 days? Even a whole week, right? If you use other supplemental activities and videos and stories and so on, you could do a whole week on this. This is a 5 day, 2 hours each day class. So that's 10 hours a week. We could stretch this out easily into 2 or 3 days. We could do a full week on this. So why not? It's less planning for me. It relieves the cognitive load or burden on my brain, and it gives students time to breathe again and use the vocabulary in meaningful ways, recycle that vocabulary, revisit the concepts multiple times throughout the week, and we don't have a set schedule or like curriculum, I guess, or I should say like a pacing guide. We don't have to do anything by a certain date. So why not take our time? And there's going to be other lessons which honestly students are really not interested in and maybe not that helpful. So we can go over those much faster, right? But money is always a popular topic with students. Money, retirement planning, finances, all those different things. Um, so why not spend some extra time on it? And I think it's a win-win-win for everybody. So here's what I was thinking. So let's take this idea of B and let's turn this into a meaningful conversation with a lot of models and pronunciation practice and communication strategies and language support and so on. So I'm going to use ChatGPT. So first I'm going to actually cut this. 4 questions. Okay. And then I'm going to go to a new chat. And I'm going to upload those questions. Now, you can just copy and paste the questions, or you can just write them down yourself. That's fine, right? Okay. So the first thing I was thinking was, well, how can students answer these questions, right? So please provide sentence starters for these questions. My students are advanced ESL. This is from the textbook. Okay, so I can get some sentence starters, right? So that's always helpful for students, especially if they're kind of tired. It's maybe later in the day, in the evening, or they're just having trouble getting started. Sentence starters, helps them get started. And again, it kind of relieves the cognitive load on them. And, especially in the beginning of the lesson, maybe their brains aren't quite warmed up yet. So I can use these sentence starters, for example. Let's zoom in a little bit. Last year, I went to blah, blah, blah for my vacation, and it cost around da, 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 da. On average, I spend about, X dollars each year on gifts and celebrations. And we're even getting some really good language, such as on average, I usually, um, every, costs around, costs about, costs approximately. So we're getting some more language that the students can use, and they might not know it, or they might know it but can't quite retrieve it without some, prompting. So, they may know a lot. Everybody knows more than they can show, and so you're kind of just giving them a little nudge in a sense. So, using these sentence starters are great, and they'll be thankful as well. So what we can also do is give model answers. So provide 3 example answers for each question. So if you don't want to give them sentence starters, you can just provide example answers. That's fine too. I'm going to reload this. Let's see. ChatGPT has been a little bit slow recently. Yeah, it's not even showing up here. Okay. Please provide 3 sample answers for each question. Yeah, see, now it works. Okay, so number 1, did you go to on vacation last year? Yes, I went to Hawaii for a week last summer. The flights and hotel together cost about $2,000, but it was worth it because it was my first real vacation in years. Oh, great. So the model is actually encouraging, hopefully it encourages students to write more than just a dollar amount, to kind of explain a little bit more, right? Okay. And what is this doing? It's not only giving them a sample answer to help them write, it could be considered more reading practice as well, right? So reusing that vocabulary. And of course, all of this will be downloaded and saved as a chat history, so you can view that document as well. You can always pause the video, but I'll make this a separate document. The entire ChatGPT conversation will be available as a separate document, along with the transcript and a summary of whatever I'm saying. So this is great stuff here. And you can read these together. And I don't want to say it eats up more time by reading these together, but it does eat up more time in the class. And you don't have to rush through everything, right? You can kind of take these step by step. It seems like a very simple activity. And the way the book presents it, it is quite simple, but it doesn't have a lot of support. And so what you're doing is you're really diving into it and really giving them a lot of time and a lot of more language input. And you're spending time talking about it, using that vocabulary, and so on. Now, here is another thing I like to do is I can say what grammar structures would be good to use for these questions. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, how can I integrate grammar in? Our textbook that we're using doesn't really have much grammar support, so this is a great way to kind of go over the grammar. Simple past tense, that's fine. Past time expressions, past continuous, okay. It costs, I spent, I paid. All right, so that you can remind them of these structures as well. You can remind them about the habits or repeated actions for simple present tense. You can remind them of frequency adverbs. Quantifiers are usually fine. Present perfect, yeah, maybe not. But I think these two might be really key, so I might emphasize these with my students next week. Let's use a simple present for something that's ongoing or repeated or habitual. Let's use a simple past for specific events in the past, right? And maybe we can go over frequency adverbs. I always, I often, I usually, I rarely, right? So last year I spent $5,000 on a vacation, although I rarely do that. So I think I might emphasize 1 and 2. So I might provide that before the writing as well, and we can go over that together so that students, they know these words and this grammar, but it's just a good reminder for them. And by writing it, it really it allows them to think about it more than they would for a conversation when they might be, less focused on grammar. So I can use these to prepare them for answering the questions. So I can say, please provide a quick summary of 1 and 2 for my students. So it's something we can go over before answering the questions. Oh, no, I wrote it wrong. See, I didn't phrase it right. Okay. Of grammar structures 1 and 2. There we go. So I thought I said questions 1 and 2. I actually meant grammar structures 1 and 2. So as you know, when you're using these LLMs, you got to be pretty precise with your wording, and that's why it might take a few tries to get what you really want. Okay, so use the simple past. Simple past? I thought it was simple present. Okay, so it's still not giving me what I want. Okay, so let's edit this. Of simple present for habitual actions and adverbs of frequency as they would relate to these questions. Okay, so that's my bad. Okay, so how often and what do you usually do? Okay, so simple present for habitual actions, and then it's focusing specifically on our topic, which is spending money, vacations, and so on, spending habits. And then adverbs of frequency. Students often have questions about adverbs of frequency because they're not sure, they want some kind of precise formula, which I understand. So you can give them a little table like this. Again, this is going to eat up more time in the class, and it's not wasted time, it's not killing time, it's not busy work. It is actually very helpful. What do they call it? Scaffolding, So it's great stuff. We don't have to rush through anything. And I think they would appreciate the support, and, it gives you don't have to think of a million things to do in a lesson. You can just really zoom in on just 1 or 2 things for that lesson. Okay, anyway, and then I can edit this later. I can make a printout, I can make a handout, I can just put it on the screen. We can write it on the board together. How I present it is up to me. But at least I've got the foundation there. I've got the raw materials. Now, here is the thing that really I get excited about is creating model conversations. I would like my students to share their ideas, but I want to create a model conversation because, or I should say, or dialogue. Because this is a topic about money, I think they might need to be sensitive with how they talk about it. Could you include communication strategies for talking about money? For example, do you mind if I ask how much you spend on transportation every month? Something like that. Also, please make a goal for this discussion. So a lot of times it's just, share with your partner, share what you wrote with your partner. And I think most of the time the students are happy to share, they just enjoy the conversation. But, a lot of times we think, okay, real discussions often have goals, right? Even if we're not sure what those goals are, they might be implied goals or subconscious goals, or unconscious goals maybe. And so maybe I want to make a goal for this discussion. So I want to have a communication strategy. So talking about something sensitive like money, and also maybe what is a goal for the conversation. So maybe a goal could be, please make a goal for this discussion. I don't know. We'll see what ChatGPT says. Okay, so talking about money politely sounds curious, not intrusive. We're looking at softeners here. And again, this is an advanced class, so please keep that in mind. I think at the end of this video, I'll show you what you can do for lower levels. So I do teach lower level students, but 3 of my 4 classes are advanced level. So, and I tend to be kind of biased towards that anyway, or I should say that's my preference. Just the way I am. But I do enjoy teaching all levels, and I do adapt. But I do have one beginning high level class, and I do teach differently with them, but I still have very high expectations of them, and I still try to make their interactions. I try to make everything for my lower level students. I try to make everything, I guess, have an authentic purpose or a communicative purpose, even if it's just a grammar class. Maybe I'll show that in another video. But at the end of this video, I'll show you how I could adapt this for a lower level class as well. And of course, I have the access to all the levels of textbooks in this series, which is the Standout series, but maybe for another time. Okay, so if you don't mind me asking, how much does that cost? About how much do you spend each month? Do you mind if I ask you? So these are great. Maybe you don't use all of these, but at least it's a good reminder to the students as well. Because, when they go out there in the real world and use English, it's not going to be like their ESL classmates, right? People may not want to talk about this. People may feel hesitant to talk about it. People may think it's strange to talk about money. So just some things to think about. Okay, so I've created a model conversation here. Hey, do you mind if I ask? Did you go on vacation last year? Oh, no, not at all. I don't mind at all, right? If you don't mind me asking, was it expensive? Okay. Now, what would be a goal for this? What kind of goals could we have for sharing our spending habits? Maybe a fun game like who is the most frugal? I don't know. So let's see what it says here. Okay, so this is great. So maybe you can have a game where at the end of the conversation, so this kind of forces students to pay attention as well. One thing we see often, and I'm guilty of this because when I was in Japan studying Japanese, and even studying Japanese in the U.S., but when I lived in Japan, I was studying Japanese really seriously, but a lot of times in conversations, I did catch myself like practicing Japanese or kind of showcasing my Japanese versus really trying to have a back and forth conversation. Of course, I'm doing both, but I think what I'm trying to say is you'll see this a lot with students is a lot of their conversation is performative, where they may not actually be paying much attention to the other person, or they may just be nodding their head and then kind of waiting for their turn to speak. I do see a lot of times where a student will speak for several minutes uninterrupted, and they're just kind of saying what they want to say and then kind of not paying attention to what the other person is saying. And sometimes that's because you're just focused on your own output as well, your own production, where it's kind of hard to focus on input as well from other people. But just something to think about. So if you can do something where the students kind of have to make a decision together, where they have to pay attention to each other, I think that also makes it a little bit more authentic. I mean, and then again, in a lot of conversations in real life, we're not paying attention to the person we're talking to, but that's a whole nother thing, right? So maybe you decide, okay, who's the most frugal person in our group? Who's the most generous person in our group? Who's the most practical? Who's the most spontaneous? And who's the most creative with saving money? Wow. So I think, and this is kind of what I had in mind earlier when I was writing my notes, is that the students are kind of hopefully able to learn from each other's spending habits, or just talking about their own spending habits can help them kind of naturally or implicitly reflect on their own spending habits, if that makes sense. So I'll say it again. What I had in mind is, the students are sharing their ideas about how they spend their money. So maybe you learn something from another person. Oh my God, that's a great way to save money. But I think it also allows you to reflect on your own spending habits. So when you actually say out loud how you spend your money, you may realize like, oh my God, I spend too much money on something. Or I don't spend enough money. I'm too cheap, right? Because frugal and cheap, it's not quite the same. Or I'm too stingy, right? So I think it's a really great opportunity to make it more than just, well, share your sentence and move on, right? And again, this is eating up a lot of time, and the students are hopefully they've been engaged, when I've done these things in the past. And as the teacher, I can use this time. Of course, I'm listening, but I can also use this time to do some planning for the next day. And we don't have to keep, running through all these different activities. A, B, C, D, E, E, F, G. Okay, we're done for the day. Next day, we're going to start the new lesson from A, B, C, D, just kind of run one lesson per day. So we can really stretch this out in a meaningful and productive way. Okay, so I like this idea. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here. So please revise the conversation, but have it be between 5 people. And by the end, they have to decide who is, okay, what did we say? The most frugal, generous, practical, and most frugal, generous, practical, and creative. Well, let's most frugal, generous, and biggest spender. So we'll just do 3 for this one. One person might have, let's do 4 people. One person might have more than one trait. Okay, let's see how it goes. Turn taking. I like this idea. Turn taking. Polite questioning. Okay. So we got 4 people. Okay. Okay. Please expand a little bit so that the speakers are providing some justification or explanation for their spending choices. Okay. It's my advanced class, so I wanted the conversations, the models to be just a little bit richer. Okay. Okay, so who wants to start? So this is a great model of how to lead a conversation. Did anyone go on vacation last year? I did. I went to Japan to visit my family. The flight was expensive, around $1,200, but I stayed with my parents, so I didn't spend much on hotels. I travel home almost every 2 years because family time is really important to me. So we're kind of justifying or explaining why we have this, why we do it every 2 years, or why do we do it every 6 months or whatever. When I was living in Japan, I came back to the U.S. Twice a year. It was a lot of money because I also had to put my pets in a hotel. So I would say I had to pay the ticket, the flight, and then the pet hotel cost was about the same as a flight. So, and that was twice a year. So I think I was spending like 4 or 5 thousand a year just flying home twice a year, including the pet hotel. But that was fine. I think once a year was not often enough. I would have lost my mind. Anyway, it sounds wonderful. I didn't take a trip last year. I usually save my vacation money for small home projects like redecorating or fixing things around the apartment. It makes me feel productive and saves money in the long run. Okay, so you're getting different opinions on spending money as well, which we'll talk about, throughout the lesson, throughout the week, throughout the unit about personal finances, because we all have very different ideas about how to spend money and why we spend money here and not here, and our priorities and our values and so on. So this is great stuff. Remember, language is all about communication, right? In the end. Okay, anyway, you can see this in detail later. Now, here's another thing I like to do. So this gives them a model, and they can read this together before they have their real conversation. And it includes the adverbs of frequency, I believe. Yeah, anyway, we don't have to get into too much detail. One thing I really like to do is I like to have these model conversations or dialogues. And I could create my own using what's called Descript, which is a software I like to use, where I can actually create the dialogues. Let me just show you a quick example. So, for example, here, now this is something I like to do. You don't have to do it.
Life is like a camera.
So I can do one person, and then the next person could be, I don't know. I think it's a guy, right?
Life is like a camera.
Oh, Lena. Okay, it's female. So let's make that
Life is like a camera. Just focus on what's important.
Sure. We'll use Libby. Okay. So this is something I can do during class even, because
exactly. We're just practicing how to talk
copying
about
and
money.
pasting.
Okay, before we start, just a reminder. This is all for fun, right? We're not judging anyone's spending habits.
Exactly. We're just practicing how to talk about money politely.
So something I like to do is I like to take these model conversations and actually use software like this to create a listening activity and play it a couple times. And so students can hear it first and then read it. And then when we're reading it together, so I'll just put this into a handout. I'll edit it a little bit. I'll modify the formatting and so on. But I'll put this into a handout. For example, here. And I do need to reformat this, of course, like, do something like that. But these are all things I can do during class, is what I'm saying. While the students are working, this kind of stuff really doesn't take much of my attention. I can listen while doing this stuff. This is pretty brainless stuff. The main thing that takes brain power is just coming up with the ideas and then putting in the prompts. But then a lot of the stuff where you have to transfer it to a Google Doc or Microsoft Word and reformat things, I can even sit next to the students and do this while they're talking, which I do. So this kind of thing doesn't really bother me. But what I like to do is I like to take these dialogues and I like to read them with the students, of course. But what I like to do is also help them with what's called, there's different words for it, I think chunking or thought groups and rhythm and so on. So doing things like this. Before we start, just a reminder. This is all for fun, right? We're not judging anyone. We're not judging anyone's spending habits. We're just practicing how to talk about money politely. Did anyone go on vacation? Did anyone go on vacation last year? So this is something I really like to do, and I do this with all levels of English proficiency, is to show them where the natural breaks are in the rhythm, or what you can call thought groups. And let me just do it here. So I would like students to read the script, but I want them to focus on thought groups. Do you understand? Okay. Sorry about the chair. So could you provide a cheat sheet for students to understand this concept? Because one of the major issues, even with advanced level students, is they read words one by one. And I think a lot of times you're not really cognizant of the fact that really in any language that we have to group words together, right? Okay, and it's using examples from the script. I usually take the bus because parking is expensive. Okay. I went to Japan to visit my family. So I like to make these cheat sheets for students. I didn't take a trip last year because I wanted to save money for some home projects. Speak in ideas, not words. Okay. I'm gonna keep moving. I didn't realize how long I'm taking, and I gotta get to the gym. Okay, so we have communication strategies and goals. How to talk. Okay, we got the thought group, so pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, all that. Oh, and then I can have a post activity, right? So after this, I'd like students to write down something. Did they, will they change their spending habits based on the conversations with classmates? Why or why not? And again, I can go through the whole thing of providing, language support and models and so on. Oh, these are better questions. Did anything in your classmates' answers surprise you? What did you learn about your own spending or priorities? Do you plan to change your spending habits even a little? Why or why not? Include an example from your group conversation, one reason. Okay. Oh, here's an example response. See, so what the LLM, ChatGPT, is, I think what usually happens is it kind of learns what you like or what you prompt. And so now it's kind of anticipating that I'm going to ask for examples, right? The only problem with keeping a really long thread, chat thread or chat history, whatever you call it, conversation thread, is that it can get a little bit slow, I've noticed. So sometimes I'll be using the same conversation thread for like 2 or 3 weeks, and it starts to really slow down. But then you can just start a new one and, summarize. You can summarize your conversation history and then, put that summary into a new one. And so sometimes you do kind of have to restart the thread, in my experience. Anyway, it gives me an example response, which I can print out or show on the screen. I don't have to print this out. I can just show it on the screen, right? Okay, I'm going to wrap up here, but you get the idea. Just a quick thing. I'd like to use this also for my beginning high ESL class. Could you please adapt all the activities? Let's see what it said. Let's see what it says here. You know what? Maybe not. Yeah, I don't want to force. I don't want to force an adaptation here. So why don't I just leave it here? And I think maybe in a future video, I'll use materials from my beginning high class to show you how I would approach this, with a lower level. Like I said, 75% of my work is with advanced level students, and I think throughout most of my career, more often than not, I was working with advanced level, like high intermediate or advanced level. And it's just my preference in general. But yeah, I definitely should. But like I said, I work well with all levels, but I think just my groove is with advanced, and that's okay. Everyone has their talents, I suppose. So I'm gonna stop there. So definitely take a look at the transcript, the chat history, and the summary, which kind of again will put the main points of what I'm trying to say here. And I know it sounds like a lot what I'm doing here, but you have to remember I'm doing this during class time. I'm very active in the class. I go to each group and I sit down with them and I talk with them. I'm always listening to them and, correcting them, or not correcting them, but kind of course correcting them if they're getting off topic, or if they're making the same mistake over and over. I do point it out. So I'm very attentive in class. I'm very engaged with the students during class. But what I am doing is I'm going back to my laptop, and I'm using my laptop, not the a classroom computer, because that's tied to the TV. So I have my laptop and I'm putting in prompts. I'm reviewing what comes out. Kind of work with the students a little bit. Like I said, sometimes I'll sit near the students, like at an empty desk near them, and just kind of work on this stuff while they're talking, and so on. And I get most of this done during class time. The only times where I'm really working outside of the classroom hours is, maybe a certain lesson just took a lot of teacher engagement. Or maybe some days I'm a little bit slow, or some days I just really enjoy talking with the students. So I may kind of lose track of time. But I would say the majority of the time I am completing this during class hours, instruction hours. And really, the only thing that takes the time outside of that is just, making copies and maybe reformatting things a bit. So during the lesson, I might be just kind of furiously or rapidly, putting all this information in and getting all the the prompts and the results from ChatGPT. And then, I may reformat it after class. That might take 10 minutes or so. Then I'll go make copies, another 5 or 10 minutes. But I feel like it really helps the class. I've been really enjoying this flexibility. And once I started doing this, it just became a habit. So, what I'm showing you here is the result of maybe, well, I mean, kind of like a lifetime, or an entire career of thinking about these things. But as far as it goes with ChatGPT, I've been using ChatGPT for about 11 months now. I started in around Thanksgiving time last year. So I've been using it for about 11 months, and I'm just kind of building these habits. So, in a sense, it becomes second nature. Me talking about it makes it seem longer, makes it seem more time consuming than it actually is. When I am not explaining how to do this, when I'm not showing anybody how to do this, it's much faster. So I think to sit down and think of these ideas, like I said, took about 10 minutes. And then the actual prompts, what, 5 or 10 minutes? And then reading the prompts, reading the results, and reformatting it. But like I said, all of this stuff is done during class time. And the one thing I will add as well is I think it's fine to just let students work on their own, as long as, you're kind of paying attention. They need time to work on their own. They need more time than we usually think. And for myself as a language learner, I don't really study Japanese anymore, but I know that I needed a lot of time as well. Um, more time than less time, I think, is always good. And if anybody finishes early, they're probably not really finished, or maybe it was too easy to begin with. Um, I always like to make these authentic, with authentic purposes, communicative purposes. Even writing tasks don't have to be done in isolation. The writing task can be a support for the discussion, right? Students might need time to write to really develop their ideas. quietly. And then, once they finished writing, they might feel more confident speaking, right? Or the writing is a post discussion activity where it gives them time to reflect. So I kind of cut it off here. I really got to get to the gym. But I hope this is helpful. And like I said, in a future video, I'll do one focused more on the lower levels.